Hey everybody, welcome to the We're Still Here for March 2018. It's a little bit late because we had a little trip to Hawaii and we wanted to do this one together. We wanted to be at a certain point when we both were sort of on the same page, the same wavelength, and we haven't done a mutual one in a while. So in case you need a reintroduction, I'm Martin and this is my wife Mariana.
What's up?
Well, some people know you as Marianne, or some people know you as that person on Twitter who's always talking about Yuri on Ice.
I have many names.
But I know her as the person I'm married to and love.
AKA the person who does nothing but talk about Yuri on Ice.
Yeah.
That's my full name, actually. But
speaking of people coming to talk to us, hello Tilly.
Hi. Come on. Come on. 1, 2, 3. You gotta jump. There you go.
Also starring Tilly the dog in this one. We thought we'd go all out and have the entire family. But more than introducing you to extraneous people that live in my house, this series is discussing our experience, oh dear, with depression and our thoughts and feelings and how we deal with them and how we don't deal with them super well a lot of the time. So this one in particular, we wanted to discuss medication and how we came to decide to be on medication and how it's, been an important decision for us individually and as a relationship, as a married couple. And the dog is going to lick us the entire time. So if there's any crying in this video, she will be here to clean up the tears very efficiently.
She's already doing so before any tears have been shed.
She's just here to take care of business before it needs to be taken care of.
Yes.
That's her modus operandi, isn't it?
Really one of the reasons why I wanted to, I thought that this video would make a good topic because personally, I was very hesitant to start taking medication for mental illness, depression, what have you, until I started talking to people and realizing that the way that I was feeling wasn't necessary, I guess. You don't have to suffer through a lot of the bullshit that you do when you're depressed. So
it gets sort of mixed in with a lot of the feelings you have on a day-to-day basis, and you start to think that a lot of those are just part of your normal feelings, your normal thought processes. And as I've learned certainly throughout making these videos and throughout the course of my recovery, it's difficult to navigate that. And I think medication in general is helpful. Not medication in general, but the idea of medication and being on it is helpful for navigating that, I suppose, to reiterate.
Yeah.
But my decision to go on medication, it was a difficult one, and it was something I struggled with. In fact, deciding to even have therapy was something that had to be something I wrestled with, something I struggled to cope with the idea of being somebody who needed help. I didn't like the idea of feeling like I was so weak that I needed assistance, and that was something, it was difficult to get around, and some days it still is.
I mean, something that made me realize that you needed help immediately was the fact that you were coming up to me and asking me, have you ever wanted to kill yourself? I was at Anime Expo and I just kept thinking about killing myself and blah blah blah, and that's when I stepped in and I didn't necessarily take over, but I kind of bullied you into...
And that's a strong word to use. It's not like bullied in a negative sense. It was...
Well, I mean, but it did, at a certain point you do have to step in, and when somebody becomes a danger to themselves or to others, you have to be the person to
guide the machine back into its correct track.
And I think the important thing is that when you're depressed, you don't think you need help, or worse yet, you don't want help because it's easier to just give up at that point. But for people who might be struggling with what to do with their significant other or whatever, I mean, it took me badgering Martin for a couple of weeks to make the phone call, and then finally I had to sit in the room with you, hand you the phone, and dial the number for you and tell you to press call, and I had to sit with you. I told you I wouldn't leave the room until you made the call because it had to get done. I was scared that I was going to lose you. Mm-hmm. So what was your first when you went in, what was it like?
To therapy or to the psychiatrist?
Well, both, I guess.
I mean, to therapy, it was pretty much. I'd had therapy before, and I'd been on antidepressant medication as a kid, like a teenager, or like in my early 20s, but it was never something. I always thought of that as like a passing thing. I guess I didn't think of it. I never. Yeah, you know what? Ultimately, I never really considered the precautions or the steps that you need to take to deal with depression to be a long-term thing or a lifelong thing, as it is in the case of a lot of people. I always thought that medication was something, well, you take it and you get over the problem and then you don't need it anymore. And I guess going in to see the psychiatrist, I still had that kind of attitude. I still was thinking of this as something, well, I'll do this for a little bit and then I'm okay. And then we move on and I don't need whatever I'm on, whatever medication they give me, I won't need it anymore. The goal is to be in a position where I don't need this. And it took a lot of figuring out and a lot of understanding and a lot of time. And I guess my experience going to see the psychiatrist initially was kind of frustrating because I didn't understand that he wasn't there to really listen to me. He was there to basically figure out what was wrong and figure out what to give me to fix it, and then I'm off on my merry way. So when I came out of there with just a bottle of pills, or even a couple of bottles of pills, I guess, for the depression and the anxiety, I was like, well, what did I get out of this? And I realized, in retrospect, I was given the tools to be able to cope with this myself, to be able to cope with this long term. And I wanted a short-term solution, I guess, to a long-term problem. And I was looking in the wrong place for it. Not to say that going to the psychiatrist was a mistake, but I was assuming that going to see the psychiatrist and coming back, I'd be like, well, now I know how to solve this and I can deal with it and it's done. That's not the case. That's not what the solution is. That's never a solution for a situation like this. It's something that there's a lot of facets to it, and going to see a therapist and going to the psychiatrist and getting medication is, yes, a big part of it, but that's not the whole thing. You have to change your entire mindset about how to tackle your own depression and what part of your way of thinking is the depression. And I think a lot of my reluctance to get medication was the depression telling me, well, you're just wasting your time. This isn't going to solve it. Medication doesn't work. Therapy is just admitting weakness. You are weak, etc. And that was my reluctance to start the process of getting help. But I think a lot of what I was going through mentally after I'd seen my psychiatrist was still unhelpful on a basic pragmatic level, just because I didn't think of medication as something that I should be on, I guess. I didn't think I should be in that position. I felt like the sooner I can get out of that situation, the better.
Well, yeah, I think you saw it as taking aspirin to reduce a fever. When we have a fever, it goes away, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. But when it comes to depression, for you specifically, it might not be true for everybody,
right,
including me. But for you specifically, when you went off of your medication for a while, it was very obvious. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what, because anytime I was like, are you taking your medication, blah, blah, blah,
I'd get very closed off and I would be vague and...
Well, you said yes, that you were taking it. And so, of course, me thinking... I mean, I don't think the pills that you were on in the beginning...
were even perfect for me.
No, because they put them on Prozac, and Prozac...
Which was another part of why... sorry to interrupt, but it was another part of why I ultimately, and if you've been watching We're Still Here for a long time, I did go off my meds, as you mentioned. But the fact that they weren't necessarily the right medication is probably a big part of why I made that decision and was convinced in my head alone, sorry Tilly, that I was right and that there was no problem.
Yeah, I do think it's important to note, because something that you were encountering a lot was this fear of oh, well, I don't necessarily like my therapist, so I have to keep the therapist, or, oh, I don't like my medication, but I have to, do it because my doctor told me to take it, and blah, blah, blah.
The first solution that's presented has to be the right one, and if it's not, there is no solution.
Yeah, which is just not true, because there are so many different kinds of medications that you can be taking, neither of us are on Prozac now, and you're still not on anything that you were before. So,
Nope. I mean, I have the anxiety medication for panic attacks, but they don't really happen these days.
I started medicating. When did I start medicating? In November?
Oh yeah, like I want to say a good 5 months ago.
Yeah, it was in November of 2017, and I basically was at a point where like I was leaving like sessions, or I would be at gatherings and I'd be like, everyone here hates me. Oh, I did one thing that like led to a lull conversation, or somebody didn't laugh at something that I said, so clearly I am the worst person on the planet and I shouldn't have any friends, and I don't have any friends, and blah blah blah. So like, and I also had this habit of like, whenever I was stressed or something, I would take on more work to cover up the stress, because I guess in my head, the less time I had to myself, the less time I had to think about things. So taking on more work was easier than just dealing with the problems that I was having. And granted, the work I was doing at the time was not something that I could have necessarily turned away, but it's a pattern that's popped up before. Like when you were going through the worst of your suicidal urges, I was going to school, and I was working full-time, and I was trying to pursue a career in opera, and I was volunteering at churches, and I just kept on adding to my plate until I didn't have any room left. Like what was on the plate was spilling onto the table, and I was like, no, everything's fine. Once I realized that that was like some sort of strange coping mechanism, because I started noticing something was wrong because I was raped in 2009, and that's not anything that's like been a huge bother to me in recent years, but I wasn't able to talk about even that without crying, and I was like, something's wrong if I'm this emotional that I can't open up about things that I'm not even affected by anymore without feeling upset. So yeah, I just was going through these strange, like, this numbness and these peaks and valleys of good and bad feelings and everything. And that's when I was like, I don't know, even if this is just a stress related thing for the work I was doing at the time, what is the point of suffering through it? And then when I started taking the medication, which currently I'm on Lexapro, I noticed that those feelings and those thoughts that were all crumpled up started ironing themselves out, and I was able to actually vocalize them without a problem. Like, it used to be that whenever I would go into therapy sessions, I wouldn't be able to start talking without crying, and I'd spend most of the session crying, and then I'd come home and not say anything. But now it's gotten to a point where I'm actually capable of taking situations apart and looking at them piece by piece and being like, okay, this triggered this sort of emotional reaction, and this triggered that sort of emotional reaction. So personally, I've noticed a lot more clarity in terms of my thoughts and like understanding why I behave the way that I do, which is helpful in my day-to-day life and trying to break down communications with others and make them more successful in the future.
Because you also were concerned that some of the feelings that you were having were being exacerbated by the medication, is that right?
No, it was a strange, like, I was, in my head, I was like, this is all just stress, this is all just stress, this isn't depression. But in reality, I think I was still, because one thing that my therapist and I go over a lot in our sessions is the effects that trauma has on the brain. And it's basically like a pain reflex where where you say ow even though it doesn't hurt. Like, let's say I hit you like that.
I do
ow.
that, yeah.
Yeah. So, ow, even though it doesn't hurt, but your brain prepares for the impact and prepares for the pain, and it understands that there's a pain feeling associated with that action. So even if I were to go bump and stop right here, you'd still go
or flinch,
and your body would still have that kind of preparation. So I started noticing, like, after I medicated, we started breaking down like those sorts of patterns in my life wherein like I either take on too much work or basically times of extreme stress for me. And a lot of those lined up with traumatic events in my past, like when I was doing too much work in school. I was also undergoing like a whole thing where my foster sister was accusing my parents of abuse. And when I was really, well, actually, like, I mean, when I was a kid, my foster brother set my room on fire, and
I was going to say,
yeah, really stressed out during that time period. And then when my sister started accusing my parents of abuse, that's when I was in choir and drama and the journalism club and everything else. And then when I was raped, I started taking on a bunch of stuff to just make myself feel like I was useful. And same with you, like I kind of had this extinction burst where I was scared that if anything happened to you, I wouldn't be able to support myself. So I took on a lot of work then, and so
including a lot of my work.
Yeah, and just recognizing those patterns helps me kind of avoid falling into those same traps that force me to get stressed. Because then I don't like. It's much easier to say no up front than it is to say no a week before the deadline.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but I wasn't able to recognize those patterns until I had medicated, and I was able to look at myself from a more unbiased perspective.
It does give you a great deal of clarity, at least if you have the right stuff. Obviously, I mean, some of the medication I've been on made me actually kind of more confused at times. It wasn't like, but it felt like I was calmer, but also I didn't feel as focused. So I feel a lot more focused now with the stuff that I'm on. I'm on duloxetine. But one thing that I remember you saying, in fact, I think a bunch of people told me when I was trying to get okay with the fact that I was on medication, and I think it was either reiterated or it was said to me when I had gone off medication, and I was trying to rationalize it with myself, or I was trying to at least move on from it, is that a lot of people are on medication. Like, so much of the world is on, I don't have the statistics, but like most people you meet are probably on some form of medication, and it's because it helps them get through. It helps them be more of a complete person. It's just a thing that people have. It's like an accessory. It's like seeing somebody with glasses. You don't think, oh man, they need help seeing. It's part of their outfit. It's just an accessory. And medication, it's not something to be frightened of or ashamed of.
Medication is part of the building blocks that you need in order to reconstruct yourself in certain cases.
There you go. Yeah.
But it's only like each brick is something different.
Yeah.
You can't just expect medication to solve your problems, because if you don't have someone to guide you through the understanding that you can potentially glean from being on medication, then it's not going to help very much. Medication is a helpful tool, but it's only one thing out of many that can be helpful. So I think that if something that we've said in this video resonates with you, and maybe you're a little shy about medicating or something, be a little more open to the idea. Because we shame people for a lot of reasons that ultimately are none of our business. Like, I mean, obviously, I've been a lot of people comment on our weight, and our eating habits are not discussed or revealed in these series in any way whatsoever. So nobody has any actual understanding of our diet, but people should feel the need to comment. And same with medication. A lot of people don't understand what goes on in your personal head. So they feel the need to say that, like, oh, well, taking antidepressants will turn you into a mass murderer, or like, it just dulls who you are, man. And it's like, no, because for some people, they are not that mess of thoughts that's like piled on top of them. They are some of those thoughts may be indicative of who they are as a person, but like,
everybody's brain sort of figures things out differently, and everybody has their own conscious that they're carrying around with them. And it's like, some people can eat a 3,000 calorie a day diet and still be pretty thin, because their metabolism just works differently. Some people obviously can eat very little and gain weight very quickly. Some people need help with depression with medication, and some people need different types of medication. Some people need stronger doses of medication. Some people don't need it, and that's okay. But it's okay to also need it. It's just a different way of living, and it's not something you should be worried about pursuing if you are, because it's not, it's your life. It's something that's part of you, and it's something that really, it doesn't matter what anybody else says about that stuff. I had a lot of comments on these videos when I started on my antidepressants, which obviously at the time they weren't ideal for me. But when I started going on them, there were comments in these videos that were analyzing every aspect of my behavior to try and be like, oh, you're obviously having this side effect with medication, when they didn't really necessarily even know what meds I was taking or what dosage I was taking, but they were trying to be, well, of course you're doing this. They're like, oh, you're manic because you're on these meds. And I'm like, well, no, sometimes I just get excited and I start jabbering and I don't know how to pull it back in. But that's been me my whole life, you know. Maybe the meds were affecting it, but it wasn't necessarily to the extent that these people are thinking. So only you really know what works, how it doesn't work, but it's ultimately up to you to go down that road and find what works.
I think something that's important to keep in mind, though, is that you should keep an eye on how people react to you and how people interact with you.
Especially if you're in a partnership, if you're like with somebody.
Yeah, because a lot of times, like, the person who is in the relationship with you will notice more of a difference than you will. Because I noticed right away when you started taking medication that, like, it was like getting to know someone else. I feel like I've had to get to know you like 3 times over the course of our relationship.
Yeah.
Because, like, obviously there's when you first meet
yeah.
and, you know...
and then there's realizing, oh, he's not the happy, friendly, loving guy all the time. He's also got the depression. And then once you change as a person to deal with that, then you're a different person again.
Well, it's not only that. It's like there was the honeymoon phase, and then there was the, oh, you do have faults phase, and then there was the crippling depression and suicidal thoughts phase, which left you pretty quiet, like, almost all of the time. And then when you started feeling normal again, when you started medicating, I could tell you started feeling more normal again because you would actually talk to me. And you would react to things that I was saying, and I'd like be caught off guard because I was like, he's engaging me? What? Like, it's strange. Like, so if you notice your partner acting a little strangely around you, it might just be because they might not recognize you right away. And that's not a bad thing. It's just a change. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Have you noticed any changes with me?
Well, you just seem a lot more chill. I mean, I think you just seem a lot more capable of handling stuff that you wouldn't necessarily be able to handle before. And that's not like a shot at you for not being able to handle stuff. It's just that, you know, there are certain tolerances that we have as people, and I've seen your tolerances go up, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like you've just... I just think there are things that I know definitely would set you off before, but like these days you're just a much more happy and you can enjoy yourself, and there was a time, there have been multiple times in our relationship where you just haven't seemed to be able to do that, and it's been nice to see you doing that. Yeah, that's what I've noticed more than anything.
Well, medication's not the right way for everybody who's suffering with depression, but I do think that there's a serious lack of conversations about, yeah?
As a part of the conversation.
Hi.
What's up, girl?
Mama, what medication do you take? None. She goes to therapy. But yeah, medication might not be the right thing for everybody, and that's perfectly fine if you decide that it's not for you. But I think it's important that we at least have an open and frank discussion about our medications, so that way people can make more informed decisions before they make a big choice like that. Because even if you only want to get on medication temporarily,
which is, you know, despite what I said, is viable. But
yeah, I mean, some people, they might just need a bit of a leg up. I might not need to medicate
for a long time.
Yeah, just because, you know, I kept doing those patterns, and that's what got me into the problems, which led to my depression. So, But even if you are only wanting to do medication temporarily, it's still kind of a schlep because a lot of medications take 6 to 8 weeks to reach their full effectiveness. So, if you don't feel better right away, it's not the end of the world. Like, we all have plenty of time. We all have, like, at least 70 to 80 to 90 years on this planet. Everything will pass. I think that's really all that there is to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, mostly we just wanted to get that discussion started for you. If you are thinking about it, if you have been considering it, if you just had it in the back of your mind, and it is important to be aware of the fact that it is not necessarily going to work immediately. It's not something that it's not a short-term thing, and that's the important thing that I learned out of all my experiences with the depression medication is that it's not something that's just going to be solved by taking a pill and then going to bed and then waking up and then it's gone. I wish that it was, but I hope that we've cleared some stuff up, and I hope that we've at the very least made some ideas make more sense to you. I hope that we've alleviated some of your concerns.
Yes.
But aside from that, we're gonna wrap this up. That's been another We're Still Here for this month, and we'll definitely be seeing you next month. We might be doing another mutual one.
Yeah.
In the near future at the very least. But aside from that, if you want to check us out anywhere else, you can find us on Twitter. I'm at Yu-Gi-Oh! TAS and you're at Marianne Miller. And we're happy to talk to you guys about any of the things that we've discussed in this video. If you want to tweet at us, if you want to, I don't know if your DMs are open, I don't know if mine are. I don't get many DMs from strangers, but it happens.
Slide into our DMs.
Slide into our DMs. Slide some medical knowledge into our DMs.
I'll leave that to doctors, thank you.
Yeah, sorry. But until next time, this is Martin and Marianne saying we're still here, and thank you for joining us this time, and we hope that you're doing okay.
Thanks, guys.